I am pleased to introduce our speaker this morning, John McHugh. John is Vice President of External Affairs for Kwik Trip, Inc., based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. In his role at Kwik Trip, he has helped the company achieve recognition as a top workplace as listed by the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and the Des Moines Register. Prior to joining Kwik Trip in 2004, John was an instructor and principal at Aquinas High School in La Crosse. He holds degrees from the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the Gregorian University in Rome, Italy. John sits on the boards of Trust Point and Viterbo University. He and his wife, Maggie, enjoy living at their log home near Sparta. John spoke to our fellowship this past January, and the overwhelming consensus was that we would all very much love to have him back. Please welcome John McHugh back to our fellowship.
Thanks, Rita. My first example of compassion outside of my family was a friend I met when I was in kindergarten. The first 7 years of my life, my family lived in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in kindergarten, I met my first friend, Joey. And as soon as I described Joey, I bet you all had a Joey in your life. This was the kid that was hyper excited about everything. So we'd be sitting on the carpet squares in front of the teacher, and the teacher would say, "Boys and girls, do you know how many bones there are in a Tyrannosaurus Rex?" And Joey would be, 3,333! Like, no, Joey, 3,334! Hyper excited all the time. Well, whenever we needed a partner, Joey would always run up to me and say, Johnny, can I be your partner? That was kindergarten. We got to first grade, and two things changed. First thing that changed is we had art class in the art room. Remember when you were in kindergarten, art class simply meant you pulled out your crayons and you tried to color within the lines. But then when you got to first grade, you got to go to the art room. We all got marched down there, and as soon as we walked in, we noticed instead of individual desks, you had tables, two to a table. So the teacher said, "Boys and girls, you're going to have an art partner this year. I'm going to let you choose your art partner." So, of course, Joey ran up to me, Johnny, can I be your art partner? And I said yes. It was a tragic mistake. Because that first day, the teacher was holding up examples from last year's classes of projects that we would do that year, and I still remember what she was holding up. She was holding up a clay fish, where you had taken wet clay and drew the outline of a fish, and then put nuts and bolts and washers and sunk it in to make it look like three-dimensional scales. And she said, "Boys and girls, you're going to be able to make one of these this year. And then we're going to put this special paint on it called the glaze, and we're going to put it in this hot oven. It's going to come out nice and shiny, and you're going to be able to make one of these." And Joey's seated next to me, and he's rocking back and forth as first grade excited boys can do. And all of a sudden, because it had been after milk and crackers, all of a sudden, all over the table, all down my pant leg. I mean, thank you, art partner. My mom had to come to school that afternoon and bring me a second pair of pants. Well, the other thing that changed in first grade is that when I was in kindergarten, my mom would walk me to school every day. And the reason why she did is we lived on Rawson Avenue. If any of you know South Milwaukee and Rawson Avenue, it's an incredibly busy street. So my mom would walk me to school every single day as a kindergartner. When I got to that first week of first grade, my dad knew that if he didn't put a stop on this, my mom would probably be walking me to school when I was a senior. So that first week, my dad came to my bedroom after dinner one night and said, "Hey, tomorrow at dinner, we're going to propose that you walk yourself to school. Your mom's going to ask you a bunch of questions. Here are the right answers." So my dad talked about the fact that if it said "do not walk," you do not walk on the sign. If you can't see the sign, because I was a short little kid, Johnny, there's this guy called the crossing guard. He's going to have his arms out. You know he's the crossing guard because he's got a big orange stripe across his chest, and if he's got his arms out, you don't walk. He went through all the rules. So the next night at dinner, my dad looked over at my mom and said, "Well, Rose, I think Johnny's a big boy now, and I think he can walk himself to school." My mom panicked and said, no, he doesn't know the rules. And I said, "Hey, Mom, I know the rules. If it says do not walk, I don't walk. And if the crossing guard has his arms out, and I know it's the crossing guard because he's got a big stripe across his chest, if his arms are out, I don't walk." And I see my dad winking at me. My mom had to cave in and allowed me to walk myself to school. But I have to confess that although my dad was ready for that transition, I wasn't. I was nervous. And at one point in time, and I don't remember how or when during the course of that first week, I confided into Joey that I was nervous walking myself home. So that afternoon, he said, Johnny, can I walk you home? Can I walk you home? Sure, Joey. Bell rang at 3 o'clock. We went out of the school. It said, do not walk. The crossing guard had his arms out. And Joey was so excited to walk me home, he went running to the middle of that street, and he got hit. I will still remember the car. It was a yellow car. It had a black stripe down the side. And I remember seeing Joey on that pavement in front of the car, and I just kept on walking home. Well, my mom heard the ambulance, so of course, you know what she was thinking. And so she comes tearing down the sidewalk, met me halfway, and said, Johnny, what happened? Nothing. Johnny, why is the ambulance there? I don't know. I mean, when you're a first grader, you're in trauma. How do you articulate that your best friend just got hit by a car? Good news is, 3 days later, Joey was back in school. He had a big gash on his cheek. He had stitches. And I remember it's the first time I'd ever seen stitches on someone. His arm was in a sling because he had broken his collarbone when the car hit him and smashed him to the pavement. But get a load of this. 3 o'clock that afternoon, the bell rang, and he came up to me with one hand. Johnny, can I walk you home? I'm like, dude, you don't learn, do you? Look what happened the last time you did this, and you want to walk me? Sure enough, 3 o'clock that afternoon, one arm in a sling, walking me home. So proud to be my friend, to journey with me. At the end of first grade, my parents decided to move up near Wausau, Wisconsin. They picked me up from school that last day, and I remember looking out of the back window of the car, and there was Joey seated on the front steps of the school just bawling because his best friend of all of life was leaving him. That to me was the first example of compassion. That compassion means that you're willing to travel with someone when they need a companion. And compassion so deep that even as a first grader, even when that traveling with someone meant difficulty and pain, and even in his own hurt, was still willing to travel with me. Think, who are the people in our lives that need to be traveled with? Who are the people that for us, when we needed someone, they were with us to walk us home? That to me was the first example of compassion outside my family. Traveling with people when they need us most. Second story. Ever had one of those days where everything seems like a hassle, a struggle? Well, in my job, I usually have to be in a sport coat and so on, do a lot of different talks. And I hate shopping for clothes. Absolutely hate it. And for those of you who have to shop for men's clothes here in La Crosse, you know there's not a lot of options anymore. So fortunately, I found a guy, a professional tailor that actually will meet me at the office once a year to kind of help me select a couple pairs of pants and a suit coat. And it's supposed to be hassle-free, okay? So last January, I did the inevitable. I had my half-hour appointment because I needed another sport coat. They're starting to wear out in the sleeves and 2 pairs of pants, and got everything selected. The next day, it was a Friday, I was traveling up to Chippewa Falls for a press conference, and my phone rings, and it's the tailor. He said, well, we got a problem. Your credit card keeps getting rejected. And a couple reasons. I don't use my credit card much, and secondly, there was probably a vendor, this tailor, that wasn't recognized by the bank, so that's why it was getting red flagged. He said, we tried 3 different times. It's not working. You're going to have to call your bank. I'm like, I'm going to a press conference and I have to leave. It's a Friday. I don't have time to deal with this. I'll deal with it on Monday. And as I'm making the trip there and back, I was just a little frustrated, thinking, if I'd gone to J.C. Penney's wouldn't be calling me saying that my credit card is rejected. This is supposed to be hassle-free, and it's not. I was just a little crabby. Well, I got back from Chippewa Falls, got back here to La Crosse, and needed gas, so I stopped at one of our stores, and it was absolutely packed. Almost all the pumps were filled. And I had to do some maneuvering to get a pump that had the same size as my fuel filler on my car. And so I ended up having to pull nose to nose with another car. And when I pulled up, I noticed that there was this young woman in the car, and she was on her phone, and she was animated. I mean animated, and not in a good way. So I got out of my car, and she ended up getting out of her car at the same time. And if you thought she was animated inside the car, she was way more animated outside. She was heated about something. So eventually she turned the phone off, put it in her pocket, and I walked up to her instinctively. I said, "Ma'am, are you having a bad day?" She's like, "Yes, I'm having a very bad day. I'm late picking up my son from childcare. I'm almost out of gas. My debit card isn't working for some reason. I don't know why. I don't have cash on me. I called my husband, and he said, 'It's your problem. Deal with it.'" Clearly having a bad day. So I just went up to her pump with my credit card, and I swiped it, and I said, "Ma'am, the gas is on me today. I hope you have a better day." Well, I got home, and I had explained to the lovely and talented Maggie McHugh, my wife, why there were going to be two almost identical charges from the same Kwik Trip store within a minute of each other. I told her what I had done, and she said, "Well, why'd you do it?" And as I reflected on it, I thought, because earlier in that day, I realized what a pain and a hassle it was to have a credit card that wasn't working. I could relate. And I thought, yeah, I had the same experience today. I want to help you with the same experience. It caused me to wonder that we have choices when we have frustrations in life. We can use those frustrations to become even more frustrated and angry at others or at the world or our situation. Or we can use that frustration to become more compassionate, so that when others who are in a similar situation like ours, we travel with them because we understand. We've been there, and to help them in their frustration. That I think frustration can make us either more frustrated or it can make us more compassionate. And hopefully the call is for more compassion. Third story. 2 summers ago, I received at my office here a note, handwritten, my name, Kwik Trip address, and the return address was a stamped address that said Illinois State Football. Now, I don't follow college football at all, let alone Illinois State. I didn't even know they had a football team. I wouldn't be able to tell you what their mascot is. So I was intrigued, and I opened up, and it was a note, and it said this: Johnny. Now, as soon as I get a note that says Johnny and not John, I know it's somebody from back home. And the reason being is my dad was John Sr., I'm John Jr., but instead of calling me John Jr., everybody back home calls me Johnny. Johnny, I wanted to drop you a note and say hello. I'm currently the recruiter for the Illinois State football team. I travel all over the Midwest prospecting high school athletes. I was just back home in Hatley, my hometown, visiting my parents during a recruiting trip. I told my mom that my favorite gas stations were Kwik Trips. She said, "Well, you know who works for them, don't you? Johnny McHugh." Johnny, growing up, I always thought you were one of the greatest guys I ever met. I can't tell you how much I looked up to you. You always carried yourself with compassion for all of us. I remember all those days you would sit at the back of the bus and help us with our problems. Thank you for being such a positive role model to a young Polish kid from Hatley. I wish you all the best, my friend. Respectfully, Spence Nowinski. Now, I hadn't heard from Spence in 25 years. It came right out of the blue, clearly out of the blue. Well, he had a little business card in that note, so his email address was on there. So I emailed him right away, saying, "Spence, thanks for taking the time after 25 years to send this note. You absolutely made my day." That note not only made my day, later that year, it would make my year. It was Tuesday, December 5th, to be exact, and I was in Waukesha, Wisconsin for work. And before I go to work, it doesn't matter if I'm at the hotel or at home, I always spend some time in prayer. And that morning, my prayer was especially difficult, because earlier that week, someone rather close to me had attacked me personally, accused me of doing some things that I would never dream of doing. And if you've ever had that experience where someone close to you thinks the worst of you and how earth-shattering that can be for you, it can rattle your cage. And so that morning in prayer, I said, "Hey, I just need some assurance that I'm a decent human being, that I'm not what they think I am. Will you help me understand that I still do good in this world? Help me see that." That was my prayer that morning. Finished my prayer time. I went to the elevator to go down for breakfast, and the door was shutting. One of the individuals in the elevator was Luke, one of my coworkers from Kwik Trip. And I went to grab the door, and he went to grab the door, and both of us missed it. The door shut. I missed it. Well, there was a stranger in the elevator with him, and he said to Luke, he said, geez, sorry we missed the elevator for that guy. And Luke said, yeah, bad news for me, because that was my boss. And so the stranger said, well, where do you work? He said, I work for Kwik Trip. And the individual said, well, Kwik Trip, I know someone that works for Kwik Trip. Any chance you know a John McHugh? He said, that was John McHugh at the elevator that we missed. So I catch the next elevator down. I get downstairs, and I walk off the elevator, and there's this big, burly, well-built guy walks up to me and gives me this huge hug. And I'm like, what's this all about? He said, Johnny, you probably don't recognize me. I'm Spence Nowinski. I'm recruiting today. Now, what are the odds that on the morning I needed a reassurance that I was a decent human being, Spence would be in Waukesha, Wisconsin on that same morning? The same hotel when there's 27 other hotels in Waukesha. And he would be in that elevator with one of my coworkers, and literally because of a difference of maybe 1.5 seconds, there would be a missed elevator and then a conversation. Sometimes when we need compassion, I think it's fair game to ask for it, because it shows up when we need it, when we ask. Because our world, as contrary to what sometimes we want to believe, is filled with compassionate people. And when we need it, we ask and it comes. Second piece, who have you not communicated with in 25 years could use a note from you? Because I would dare say that that note of kindness or compassion may not simply make their day, it might, as it did for Spence, make my year. Who will we let know a word of compassion from us? Last story. Again, my family moved up near Wausau, Wisconsin when I was a little kid. And so I went to high school at D.C. Everest. It's a large public high school in the Wausau area. Well, when I was a junior and senior in high school, the school hired me to paint murals throughout the school. So in front of the industrial arts area, I painted a bunch of saws and hammers and equipment. In the science area, there was a part of a space shuttle and some other scientific equipment. We had just gotten, I'm going to date myself, we had just gotten Apple IIe computers for the lab. So remember the Apple logo was that multicolored apple? They asked me to paint that apple in the computer lab. Okay, now you know that I graduated in 1985 from high school. Well, because they wanted the murals to last, I had to use enamel paint on the concrete walls. So with the enamel paint, I also would always have with me a little bit of turpentine to clean the brushes or anything else that needed to be cleaned. Well, Julie Falkuski, who was our evening janitor, before I started this whole project, came up to me and said, Johnny, I'm going to give you a little helpful piece here. She'd given me a large stack of Dixie cups. She said, so when you're on top of the ladder painting something, instead of taking the entire gallon of paint, just pour a little paint in the Dixie cup, because if you tip the paint over, you don't have an entire gallon of paint everywhere. I mean, it's incredibly thoughtful, you know? But that was just an indication of how nice Julie was. She was always watching out for us. Now, for a year and a half, I followed Julie's advice to the T. Went to the top of the ladder. It was always a small Dixie cup of paint. You know where this story's going. It was towards the end of my project, and I remember exactly what I was painting. I was painting the nose of the space shuttle, which has the black tiles on it, for those of you who might be familiar with the space shuttle. And of course, I had a gallon of black paint, and I was getting tired and lazy, and I brought the full gallon of paint up to the top. And at one point in time, it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I was tired, and I turned it around, and with my left hand, bumped that gallon of paint, and over it went. Black enamel paint everywhere. All over the wall, all over the tiles, in the tile grout. Well, I had a small container of turpentine, but that was not enough to clean up that mess. I literally went to every single boys' and girls' bathroom in the school for all the paper towel I could find. And of course, you know, this is 1984, 85. There was no such thing as 24-hour Walmarts at that time. So by the time I got done, it was still this big black mess everywhere that I was just going to have to leave and go home, and the next morning come in and see what I could do. That night, I did not sleep at all, because I'm thinking, well, all the money that I made in this project, I'm going to have to use to pay for the new tiles and the tile grout and the mess that I had made. Just obsessed about it all night long. Didn't sleep a wink. Next morning, got to school, and I went to the hallway where the disaster had happened, And I looked at the walls, I looked at the tile, the grout, and you couldn't tell that there was any paint spilled. And then I started thinking to myself, did I dream this last night? I mean, well, so I went through the rest of the day at school, and that evening I was back painting my project, and Julie, the janitor, came through, as she always would, and she'd always compliment me on what I was doing. Didn't say anything to me, and then I looked at her hands. Her hands were just black, and her cuticles and her nails were just red and bloody from all the turpentine of cleaning up my mess. She had cleaned up my mistake so that no one would ever see it and no one would ever know. And she did it at her expense and never said a word to me. Not a, I told you so, or why didn't you follow my directions? It was simply, knowing that I had made a mistake, and she spent the time fixing it. To me, one of the deepest examples of compassion is when someone comes to us after we've made a mistake that we think we can't fix, and we think the results are going to be permanent. And someone who cares about us so deeply comes through and helps us carry that pain and works hard that maybe we can even erase the results of that mistake so that no one will ever see and no one will ever know. And sometimes it comes at their own expenses. That to me is the deepest source of compassion. And I think many of us who are old enough in life to know that there's some mistakes that we'll never recover from, some mistakes that will always be there. But maybe we've been blessed with someone who loves us so deeply that they will take away our sins, cover the mistakes that we have made. That to me is compassion. How do we practice compassion in our world? I think it's pretty simple. It's what all of you know so well because you believe it. You celebrate it every week. It means journeying with others when they come up and say that I have a daughter that's ill. It's being with each other and traveling with them even when it sometimes costs us our own pain or even our own money, our own time, our own talent. It means sometimes being grateful for the fact that someone we've not heard from in 25 years reminds us that we're a good person and we do good work. And sometimes we're blessed with the deepest of all satisfaction, someone that in your difficult moments has come to help carry and fix what is so challenging. Our world needs compassion. You're all it. Thank you for celebrating it. Thank you for believing it. And thank you for living it. Our world needs you more than ever. Thank you.